So welcome to my podcast. I'm Gaby Zacara, and this is my first episode of a brand new podcast that I'm starting, and it doesn't yet have a name, the actual podcast. Similar to me, when I was first earthed on this plane, my parents didn't know what to call me, so for 2 days they just called me the baby, and so they decided on the name that they wanted to call me. And it's funny because names are really important, because when you say I am and then you say like your name, it's literally like saying an affirmation, I am, and then whatever you say, you are. So it's important what your name means or what it sounds like and the etymology and the spells that it might be casting, because as you name things and yourself, you are conditioning them to be more like that. So this is why it says, like in the religious texts, or it just feels bad to talk negatively of people, to bitch, to slander, to gossip. It feels bad. And also a lot of the religious texts say that it's very bad to do that, simply because you are literally casting them spells upon the people, the places, the things, whatever you're labeling and talking about in a negative way. That is literally a spell that you are casting on them or on that thing to be that way. Let's say, for example, for me, I used to have in the past people calling me stupid behind my back, but thinking I was a bit of a stupid, dumb, ditzy kind of person. And so what happens is, as and when they might say, oh, she's dumb, she's ditzy, she's stupid, they were casting those spells onto me. So those words came as energies, as demons, as negative entities that were coming, and they were conditioning me. So they'd attach to my energy field, and then those energies would imbue my field with ditzy energy, stupid energy, like all these things that people were putting on me. And then what would happen is, then because it's mixed in with your energy, you start actually acting in those ways. You might do something a bit ditzy or stupid, and you might even think, why have I done this? Like, it's not even usually how I would be. I wouldn't usually make that mistake. I wouldn't usually be ditzy or stupid or dumb like that. But what's happened is people have given you that energy because that's what they either think you are, believe you are, or want you to be. Some people can actually just put stuff on you because they're jealous, and so they'll throw anything negative on you to try and subconsciously put you down, because it makes them feel better about themselves if they are jealous of you. So basically, whatever you say about people, places or things, they become that, because that's the energy and the spell you condition them with. So if people call me ditzy and stupid, it's not fair, because even if I have been, it doesn't serve me to be that way. It doesn't serve anyone to be that way. And so if people are putting that energy on me, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And how am I ever meant to change and grow and stop being ditzy or stupid or dumb if people keep giving me that energy and then I keep playing it out? So this is why it's important to become aware of your energy, of the spells, particularly on your own life. So one, be aware of what you send out to other people. Always send out positive things, say nice things, call them nice names, and call them nice things and label them nicely. But also be aware of when someone's done it to you. So be aware of when you've got a bad spell on you. Be aware of when you've got these energies that are playing on you, that people are trying to put on you, because if you're not aware of the cycle and the loop, you'll continue to play them out, and that'll just be how you be for your rest of your life. And everyone deserves, or everyone serves, the chance at growing and changing. And so it's not fair to box people in that box and label them, oh, that's just how they are. Well, that's not fair, is it? Because they might have been that way in the past, but it doesn't serve them to be that way. It doesn't serve the higher self to be that way. And they might want to be trying to change. And so it's not fair for you to limit and block their change and growth just for the sake of speaking negatively of them or calling them a negative name, and then ask yourself why you're even doing that. Even if you think that of them, it's not fair to put them in that box. So names are important. So that's why I'm like, I want this name of this podcast to be right. So I've not exactly chosen the name yet, because like I was saying, it kind of like puts a spell on it then to become what the name, kind of the energy of the name is. And so for now, I'm not sure, but maybe by the time this is uploaded, say if I do upload it to Spotify, Soundcloud, maybe then it'll have a name. But this particular episode, I'm calling it The Tale of the Little Mermaid, because something that came up recently is all the planets. I look into astrology a lot. I look into something called syncretism, which is basically the oneness in all things, how everything is related in some way in the whole of the world, in the whole of the cosmos. And the universe and the cosmos is so much more simple than we've been told to believe, and that then people make out. They make out like it's much more difficult and confusing to make us confused, so that we don't ask questions, so we don't wonder why we're here, wonder who God is, who created us, and all this kind of stuff. Science and even religion have kind of like made everything seem very confusing, very like you don't even understand really who we are and where we've come from and kind of thing, and our true history's been changed, and we've basically fully forgotten as mankind the truth basically. And so I want to share the truth of what I've found, and also I'm just going to say, and I'm going to say this at the beginning of every podcast because I'm not really sure what the rules are for uploading them to Spotify and stuff, but all of this is for entertainment purposes only. It really is just the stuff that I've kind of learned and that feels right with me and resonates with me. So there might be stuff that you also agree with and resonate with. There might be stuff that you don't. But it's just me kind of adding my light to what you might already be aware of. And then like as we each add our own light, we put the puzzle pieces together and we get a really good idea of what's going on and where we are and what we're meant to be doing and everything else that goes with it. So we're talking about like syncretism. One thing that I've learned on my journey is that a lot of the different stories, the myths, the fairy tales, a lot of the stories that we hear, including the movies, the books, they're all playing out a similar kind of theme. And there's something called the hero's journey, and it's basically about kind of the hero, so the everyday person like me and you, going on our own journey, going on this journey of life, but also finding and desiring a deeper fulfillment, a deeper like wisdom and knowledge than just the everyday mundane stuff. So it's like you go on this journey and you learn about yourself and you learn about life and you learn these lessons, or you have these growths, and then you face the battles, you face these kind of tasks and initiations, and you basically go, you have your highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and at the other side you become the hero of your own journey and you achieve enlightenment really. So this same story plays out in pretty much all the tales that we can think of, because it's something everyone can relate to, is basically the journey of life. And what I've noticed is, if you look into astrology, there's a lot of, there's different like archetypes. So there's different types of energies that play with the cosmos in our lives, in the world. And so if you look at the different zodiac as an example, each of the different zodiacs, they have their own characteristics. And they're also governed by certain planets. The planets too have their own characteristics. They have positive sides and negative sides, and they have different types of energies, and they test us in different ways. The planets to me are the gods. So I believe there's one main God, the prime source creator of all things. Imagine the one God like a bright white light. And then the one God splits herself into smaller fragments, which is like, when you get a white light and you shine it through a prism. So, the Pink Floyd album, you shine the white light through a prism, and then it splits off into the colours of the rainbow. So the one light splits off into these 7 different shades of colour. And so I kind of see it like the one light is God. It splits off into the 7 different colours of the rainbow, your 7 chakras, the 7 rays of the week, your 7 main visible planets in the sky from the earth, the 7 notes in a musical scale. And so just like the colours of the rainbow look different, they appear different, they might even feel different if you can feel colours, or that some of them have a warmer feeling, some of them have a cooler feeling. Well, they're different rays of energy, they're different vibrations and frequencies, and so that's why they're experienced differently. And it's the exact same with these different 7 kind of your chakras, the 7 musical notes. You hear them differently. There's the 7 main visible planets, and I'm going to talk to you about them in a sec, but I kind of see them as like 7 main gods. There will be loads more gods, but I'm just focusing on the 7 main ones today, just to kind of keep it quite simple. But so God splits himself off, and then there's like more gods underneath God, basically. And so the different gods have different archetypes, and I do believe that the planets are the gods, because the planets, I believe, are actual consciousnesses. So they're actual living beings. And you might think, well, that is so strange, because it literally just looks like a light in the sky. So how could it possibly be a being like me and you? And so I completely get that. But what I'm saying is, to us in this realm, in this 3D realm, they look like lights. However, if we were to access the higher dimensions, we would see that those conscious awareness can actually take form, and we would see them in a different light. We would see them and experience them in a different way, where we would actually be able to really kind of like understand who and what they are. Whereas down here, we can't see them physically, just a little light, so it doesn't look like a talking being. However, if you go up to higher planes, I reckon it's like some kind of light or consciousness that you can communicate with, and it can take shapes and forms, and we'll be able to see it and experience it in a different way. So those lights in the sky, they're actually portals to the higher planes and to the different planes. And so when we look up at them, we're seeing the light coming from those different planes. And if we were to go up to those planes, we would experience the God of those planes, which are the demigods, the lesser gods, the gods that were created by the main god. So these different archetypes then, they play out in all of these stories as well. So like Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, that Snow White is the white prime source creator god, white being like a bright white light, because that is literally what God is. And then from that is the 7 dwarfs, or the 7 demigods, dwarf gods, whatever it is. And these have different, they're kind of named after different vices. There's like lazy, dozy, like dopey kind of thing. There's different names they have, which is similar to the 7 virtues and 7 vices. So you've got obviously your positive and your negative sides of these energies, or your chakras. And the 7 dwarves represent that as well. And the 7 planets have the positive and negative sides, and it all correlates to each other. So each of the 7 planets will look after one of your 7 chakras. They'll look after one of the particular rays of the rainbow and resonate at that frequency. They'll resonate with the particular note in the scale, and so it's all intertwined and interconnected, and that's what syncretism is. So say for an example, you've got your sacral chakra, which is the orange chakra, and that is like lust and around your sexual area and energy. And so that chakra in particular would be the vice of lust, and maybe the virtue of, I'm not sure what the opposite of lust is. It is a virtue and a vice, but the opposite, the positive aspect of that energy is creation, so being creative. So that particular chakra has a positive and negative aspect. That chakra also will be vibrating and resonating at a certain frequency that is the same frequency as one of the notes in the musical scale. And it's going to be the same frequency as any orange crystal, because it's the orange chakra. So anything orange will be vibrating at that same frequency. And it also will have one of the gods or goddesses assigned to it, which I believe might be Venus, because Venus is about creativity, musical arts and stuff, and she also is on the other side, her alter ego or her ego is Lucifer, which is lust. So that's kind of how it all correlates. The earth is green, and the earth correlates to your heart chakra. The earth is an anagram of the word heart, because sometimes the words teach you and tell you the truth. It's all kind of put in front of your face for you to see and recognize and pick up on the clues. So the letter F also is the earth and the heart letter, the letter F in the scales, in the musical scales. So you've got F, you've got the heart chakra, you've got the earth as the goddess, you've got green, so anything green, crystals and stuff like that. And so each of the different rays of the rainbow has its own kind of crystal, colours, musical notes, gods, and energies and archetypes and vices and virtues and positive and negatives that go with it. So I was recently looking into Neptune a bit more, because I'm going to just tell you the main 7 planets that I'm talking about as the main 7 kind of gods. And there are gods above these 7 as well. The main 7 are the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. So they're the main 7. And they govern the 7 days of the week, or the 7 rays of the septenary, which is the sun is Sunday, the moon is Monday, moon day, Mars is Tuesday, Mercury is Wednesday, Jupiter is Thursday, Venus is Friday, Saturn is Saturday. And so they're the 7 main ones. And the sun represents our soul. So our soul, the word sol in Spanish and French is sun. It means sun, and it's also spelled S-O-L, but it's kind of spoken like soul, the soul. And so the sun is the soul of our soul, our system. So the sun is basically the light and the soul that gives life to everything on this plane, which it does. Without the sun, there would be no life on this plane. Without the moon, there'd be life. Without the other planets, there would be life. Without the sun, there would be no heat, there would be no light and no life. And also the sun is a portal as well, a portal of light. And the sun actually projects everything into this plane like a projector. So, you know, if you go to the cinemas and you've got like the cinema screen, the earth is pretty much like the screen, and as the sun projects its light in, it projects the movie into this plane. And so everything that we are seeing and experiencing, we are all projections of the sun projecting itself in and projecting the light in for us to experience life in this plane, in this game. So the sun and the planets, the gods or goddesses and the higher beings of light often come down to the earth to assist those who are on the earth in ascending. So the earth used to be a goodly and godly place where souls can come and they can experience physical things and they can enjoy the beauty of earth and the animals and everything that earth has to offer. Before earth became enslaved in a false matrix by demons, devils and evil ones, basically. So what's happened is, because souls have got stuck here on the earth plane, when the demons and the evil ones took over, they basically turned it into a prison planet and poisoned everyone on earth to the point where without help they will never wake up to the truth of who they are and what they are. Because when you go to earth, you do forget. That's a part of the experiences. You forget when you come down, so you can experience and learn who you are again. However, the way that the earth has been kind of overrun and overtaken, they've basically started putting poison in our food, spraying poison in the air, teaching us false teachings about our true history, cutting off our relationship and connection with God and the divine and the spirit realm, so that we don't remember what's really out there, where we truly come from, and that we aren't meant to be here. We're meant to be up in heaven with God. We can come down here to experience stuff, but you're not meant to come and get stuck here. But people have got stuck here, where they get stuck in a cycle of reincarnation, where their soul can never leave and go back home. And so that's why light beings and the sun and the planets, or the luminaries I like to call them, which is the gods and goddesses, the angels, all beings of light, they come back to earth. Those who have already escaped or stayed at home with God, and they never left and they never got stuck on earth. It's like rescue mission, coming back into earth, incarnating and infiltrating from the inside out to help those souls who are stuck on earth to remember who they are, to awaken and spark that light of God back in them, so that they can remember in their soul, I want to go home, and then they go home. Otherwise they just get stuck here on this plane, become loosh, which is simply food for the evil ones and the demons, because the demons feed off our energy. We're like batteries to the demons here. The demons don't have any of their own light, so they have to feed off our light to even survive and stay on this plane. So that's why they got trapped in the first place, because the demons wanted them and their light for food. And so the light beings have come and infiltrated to remind people to wake up. Hey, you're not from here. You need to go back home, back to God. And so the sun comes down pretty much every 2,000 years. He came down as Jesus Christ. He came down as Horus in ancient Egypt. He has been Samson. And Moses, he was the moon, an incarnation of the moon. Hermes, or Tahuti, Thoth, he was a incarnation of Mercury. So was Merlin. King Arthur was the sun. So there's loads and loads of different beings who were the planets or the luminaries, who came down and incarnated and almost became like worldwide famous through history for being people to make a difference to humanity. And that's because they came down to make a difference to humanity, and they shone their light so bright that people remembered them for hundreds and thousands of years to come. So the last time the sun came was Jesus Christ. And that's why in the Bible, because obviously the sun represents your soul, in the Bible when Jesus says you can't get to God through without coming through me, and he also says, I am the way, I am the light, kind of to get back home. He's talking about finding your soul, finding the light within yourself. You need to find the Jesus Christ, the light, the sun within yourself. Find your soul, and your light will guide you home, and your soul will guide you home. So we're going to take a short break, and I'm going to play one of my songs called Home. And this song really reflects what I want to talk about after the break. And basically after playing my song, I want to talk about the Little Mermaid, the original story, because I used to love the Disney Little Mermaid. There was something that just really resonated in my soul with it. And I wanted to talk about how it is a complete reflection of the hero's journey, but there's a weird twist at the end which has actually surprised me, and I had some interesting thoughts and I wanted to share them with you and even get your ideas as well. So obviously I loved the Little Mermaid movie, and I decided to just have to do a bit of research and see if it was based on an original tale somewhere. And I found that it was actually written in 1837 by a guy called Hans Christian Andersen, which is a strange name in itself, because Christian is like the sun god Christ, Christian. And Andersen, that's the name of the guy, of Neo in The Matrix, his last name. They call him Mr. Anderson. And so that's interesting that person's name is literally a reflection of Neo and The Matrix. because Neo in the Matrix is Jesus Christ. He's the Son. And again, this is why I'm saying all movies and all kind of tales, they all have this same story of the hero's journey. And the hero is basically the Son. So when I was talking about the hero being your soul, what it is really, it's the soul's journey in the physical form, in finding itself again, in finding the light again, and finding more than the material matter or the matrix. And that's exactly what Neo did. He was the Son. He found his soul and he escaped the matrix. Well, all of these stories about the hero's journey of your soul being the hero, like overcoming these trials and tribulations and escaping the matrix or becoming enlightened. So The Little Mermaid is the same story. However, there's a strange twist, which is what I want to share with you. So it was written in 1837, and I want to play my song Home now, and you can enjoy it. And Home was written in my darkest times when I was on the hero's journey, like going through it and trying to, just wanting to find my enlightenment and trying to find that light. And it feels like such a perfect reflection to what the Little Mermaid is going through in the real story. So I'm going to play Home now for you, so enjoy, and then after that we'll get back to it and read the true story of the Little Mermaid. Only a wave out in the ocean, only a drop of pure emotion, only touch the surface but I'm floating. Only peace, my resurrection, only love is my direction, only know I'm worth it in the present. And you say I don't wanna go home today, I don't wanna leave this earth plane. Time is gonna have to wait, 'cause when things are getting hard, yeah, you need me more than ever. And I just wanna stay by your side, wait upon you for a lifetime. I ain't in a rush to fly back home. Never enough, the tide keeps breaking. One test and then the other's waiting. Only see the good in that I'm changing. And well, is it really fair that we were struggling down here? And do you really care? 'Cause I've been trying on my best and working on myself. So I might talk a little bit about how that is a reflection of what the Little Mermaid is going through. Or you might have been able to pick up on it, but I'm going to now read you the original Little Mermaid story. This is the translation because I think that Hans Christian Andersen might have been Dutch or something, so this is the translation anyway, and what I'm going to do is read it through and I'm going to talk about how it is both a metaphor and also a reflection of the hero's journey. So with these stories, these myths, and this is why I went back to see if the Little Mermaid was based off an original myth. When you look back at texts that were written at least a few hundred years ago, it's possible that there's a lot more truth in them because our history has been changed, and pretty recently as well. And so the stories that you hear today could have been changed, could have been edited to try and hide the truth. So if you look back in old books, in old texts, and look at the old stories and the old myths, there's so much more truth and so much kind of depth to them that I feel is better guidance than what we might see today. For example, the Disney movie, the ending's changed. The ending of this one, I feel, is much more important than what happens in the Disney movie. So we're going to read it and I'm going to talk through it, the things that I notice about the story and how it's a reflection of the hero's journey and enlightenment. So, The Little Mermaid. Far out in the ocean, the water is as blue as the petals of the loveliest cornflower, and as clear as the purest glass. But it is very deep too. It goes down deeper than any anchor rope will go, and many, many steeples would have to be stacked one on top of the other to reach from the bottom to the surface of the sea. It is down there that the sea folk live. Now don't suppose that there are only bare white sands at the bottom of the sea. No, indeed, the most marvellous trees and flowers grow down there, with such pliant stalks and leaves that the least stir in the water makes them move about as though they were alive. All sorts of fish, large and small, dart among the branches, just as birds flit through the trees up here. From the deepest spot in the ocean rises the palace of the Sea King. Its walls are made of coral and its high-pointed windows of the clearest amber, but the roof is made of mussel shells that open and shut with the tide. This is a most wonderful sight to see, for every shell holds glistening pearls, any one of which would be the pride of a queen's crown. The Sea King down there had been a widower for years, and his old mother kept house for him. She was a clever woman, but very proud of her noble birth. Therefore she flaunted 12 oysters on her tail, while the other ladies of the court were only allowed to wear 6. Except for this, she was an altogether praiseworthy person, particularly so because she was extremely fond of her granddaughters, the little sea princesses. They were 6 lovely girls, but the youngest was the most beautiful of all. Her skin was as soft and tender as a rose petal, and her eyes were as deep as the blue sea, but like all the others she had no feet. Her body ended in a fish tail. Something I'd like to point out in this story is I noticed the number 6 a lot, and I was like, why the number 6? Because the number 7 is the usual number that comes up a lot in these stories, obviously because of all the 7s I was talking about. So I was like, why the number 6? Well, this has just come to me as something. The zodiac has 12 zodiacs, and when you become an enlightened master and you basically achieve the hero's journey, you ascend the 12 energies of the cosmos. You become the 13th, and Jesus Christ was the 13th. So he had 12 disciples, and he was the 13th. There's 12 signs of the zodiac, and then there's people say the 13th is that Orpheus. What it actually is before you become enlightened, before you find the light in your soul and become enlightened on this plane in life, you're governed by the 12. So the 12 energies at play govern everything on earth, including your life, including the weather, including like everything that happens on the earth is governed by the energy of these 12 zodiac and the planets that rule them. And so the whole of the heavens controls life on earth because of the energies and the movements, and we kind of play out and act out those energies. And the energies push us to grow, they kind of grate on us and restrict us and give us gifts, and this is all part of this moving journey that we learn from and grow from. And so when you become an enlightened master, rather than kind of being, say like I'm an Aquarius, I was born under the Aquarian energy, so you're kind of one of the zodiacs, but you're not all 12. Well, when you become an enlightened master, when you've passed these trials and tribulations, what you do is it's like you get kind of badges or merits or light from all the different trials, all the different types of energies and tests you could possibly get, to where you become a well-rounded individual, the whole individual, the holy individual. And that means that rather than just being under one zodiac, you become them all. So you gain the 12, you gain the knowledge and wisdom and the light of the 12, and then you ascend the 12. That's when you become enlightened, as you become the ascended one, you become that 13th, you become the Christed Jesus Christ. And I was wondering, this number 6, well, the zodiac is there's two halves. One is the half of like the higher mind and the higher self and being in the light. One is the lower half, which is being in your animalistic self, your lower mind, and like the more physical stuff. So one's like spiritual, which is the top half, the light side. The lower half is like the night side, or the material and being in your animalistic nature. And the top side, the light side, is like your virtues, and then the bottom side is your vices. So you kind of have 6. If you split it into the 2, the 6 signs or 6 of the energies, say, that represent being the in your higher mind. There's 6 in the lower mind, and then if you have all 12, well then guess what? You're a holy, whole-rounded, holy soul. You're a holy person, and that's the achievement of enlightenment. And so with the grandmother, it says that she was allowed to wear 12 pearls on her tail, yet everyone else can only wear 6. I think that could be a representation of everyone else is still only in the lower aspect, the lower mind, and so they've only got the badges or the light of the 6, the lower 6. They've not attained enlightenment to attain the whole part of it, to become holy and to attain all 12. So that's just what's come to me as I'm reading this now. The other thing is the number 6 can represent like the beast, 666. It can represent physical matter, because 666 is the number of like carbon. I think like 6 electrons, 6 neutrons and 6 protons make up carbon, which is what most things on the earth is actually made of. So people talk about the number 666, the number of the beast, being literally just being encased in physical form on this earthly plane and in the lower mind kind of thing. So this could be why the number 6 keeps coming up, but however, there could be other reasons as well. So I'm just going to carry on reading. The whole day long they used to play in the palace, down in the great halls where live flowers grew on the walls. Whenever the high amber windows were thrown open, the fish would swim in, just as swallows dart into our rooms when we open the windows. But these fish now would swim right up to the little princesses and eat out of their hands and let themselves be petted. Outside the palace was a big garden with flaming red and deep blue trees. Their fruit glittered like gold, and their blossoms flamed like fire on their constantly waving stalks. The soil was very fine sand indeed, but as blue as burning brimstone. A strange blue veil lay over everything down there. You would have thought yourself aloft in the air with only the blue sky above and beneath you, rather than down at the bottom of the sea. When there was a dead calm, you could just see the sun like a scarlet flower with light streaming from its calyx. Each little princess had her own small garden plot where she could dig and plant whatever she liked. One of them made her little flower bed in the shape of a whale. Another thought it neater to shape hers like a little mermaid. But the youngest of them made hers as round as the sun, and there she grew only flowers which were red as the sun itself. She was an unusual child, quiet and wistful, and when her sisters decorated their gardens with all kinds of odd things they had found in the sunken ships, she would allow nothing in hers except flowers as red as the sun, and a pretty marble statue. This figure of a handsome boy, carved in pure white marble, had sunk down to the bottom of the sea from some ship that was wrecked. Beside the statue she planted a rose-coloured weeping willow tree, which thrived so well that its graceful branches shaded the statue and hung down to the blue sand, where their shadows took on a violet tint and swayed as the branches swayed. It looked as if the roots and the tips of the branches were kissing each other in play. Nothing gave the youngest princess such pleasure as to hear about the world of the human beings up above them. Her old grandmother used to tell her all she knew about ships and cities and of people and animals. What seemed nicest of all to her was that up on land the flowers were fragrant, for those at the bottom of the sea had no scent. And she thought it was nice that the woods were green, and that the fish you saw among their branches could sing so loud and sweet that it was delightful to hear them. Her grandmother had to call the little birds fish, or the princess would not have known what she was talking about, for she had never seen a bird. When you get to be 15, her grandmother said, you will be allowed to rise up off the ocean and sit on the rocks in the moonlight to watch the great ships sailing by. You will see woods and towns too. Just wanted to make a note about, obviously the other sisters were creating these gardens and they were having them in shapes of whales and decorating them with all sorts of stuff, and all that she wanted and all that she fascinated and thought about was the sun. She had her garden in the shape of a sun. She wanted to plant flowers that represented the sun. She had a marble statue of a male, which is a representation of the sun god, because what it's in reference to is all the other sisters, they were happy with these material things and these kind of down-to-earth things, just things of the realm, things of that land, whereas she wanted more. She had this desire to know the soul, to find the light, to follow the sun, and she basically was worshipping the sun because there was something in her soul inside of her that wanted and desired more than just the material, more than some kind of like fancy shapes and some anchors or whatever it was that had come from these shipwrecks. She had this desire to know the sun and basically to find her soul. And this is the path of the hero's journey and the spiritual awakening that we all have, where we have this desire, something within us that wants more than just what this land or this realm can offer us. Another thing I found interesting is the grandma said that when she gets 15, and this is what I was saying, the number 6, because 15 is 1 and 5 is 6 again. When she gets 15, she's allowed to rise up out the ocean and ascend to go and see the land, the realm of the land. Now, the ocean is a representation of, I was saying like there's the top half and the lower half of the zodiac. So the top half is the higher mind, the heaven on earth, being in the heavenly planes. The bottom half is the lower mind, being in your animalistic nature, the animalistic self. What she's saying is, in the ocean is more dense than the air. So the ocean is actually more of a heavier density realm than land. So the ocean is a lower plane of existence than up on the land. Now, mermaids, they're half fish and half humans. Now, there's a lot of like characters in like stories, and I've even seen kind of old paintings and old maps where people talk about these beings that were half animal, half human. And there's two things this could be here. So the first thing, and this is the most obvious thing that comes to those who follow the kind of esoteric occult type practices, is that it's a metaphor. So the half animal is a representation of your lower self and being in your animalistic nature or your ego. And then the top half, the human self, is about becoming the higher version, being more human or being more even angel-like. So you've got like the top half, you want to ascend up into being more heavenly and being more just ascending upwards in consciousness, because you've got minerals and stones and they're of a lower conscious awareness. And then it goes up to plants, and then it goes up to animals, and then it goes up to humans, and then up to angels. And so as a human, we're actually in the final stages on this earth realm before we can ascend up to become angels. As we evolve and grow as a soul, our goal is to continuously grow and move upwards in the planes, back up to God, back up to the highest light. And that's why everything looks up and grows up, and all the plants and the trees, they all grow up and try and reach the sun. And we do that on a soul level as well. So we all want to become our highest and best selves. At least that's innate within us, is to always try and be better and do better and be good and do good. And that's the soul's journey, is to grow and improve. And so on this plane, we're really a lot tested whether we're going to act like an animal in survival, in our lower mind, in our ego, in our emotions, and in our lower self, or are we going to try and act in our higher self, act like an angel, act in like the mind and the higher heart, rather than like survival and fighting each other and stuff. Animals are beautiful. However, they are of a slightly lower conscious awareness than us. They're less evolved souls than us, and so they are beautiful, and they have the potential to become the highest and the best, most beautiful, soulful beings ever. But where they are right now, the fact that they are animals, they are still evolving and growing, and we're just a little bit ahead of them. It doesn't mean we're better than them, but we're just ahead of them in our journey. So you don't want to start going back on yourself and being in the ego and being in your animalistic self. You want to actually be progressing forward and starting to try and act like an angel would, and looking after and being of the light. And so what's interesting as well is emotions are represented by water. So them living in the water, they're living in their emotions. And the animalistic self, the ego, that is your emotions. So the word ego is energy, go. And the word emotion is energy in motion. And they're the same thing. And so when we have our emotional attachments, when we act emotionally to things, we're living in our animalistic self and in our ego, because our emotions, some people think that they are like they're meant to be our spiritual guidance system. They're not. So our spiritual guidance system is basically our higher self, our intuition, following our guidance that comes when we meditate and things like that. And that comes from our higher self and our higher planes, not from the lower planes. And so when people react emotionally about things, it's often irrational. There's a really great book, it's called The Way of Emotion by Chris T, and it explains why humans react emotionally to things, but how we were never meant to react to the extent that we do now. So the way that we live now, it's like we live in fight or flight constantly, in a state of stress or anxiety all the time. And that's not how we were meant to be, and that's not true enlightenment. That's not how God made us. That's humanity's descended and fallen state. That's us in our ego. As an example, if you were with your partner and say a really good looking person walks into the room, your partner might just think, cool, new friend, let's get to know them. There's no negative emotions or negative reaction. You might have fear or anger or jealousy because they're really attractive and you're scared that your partner's going to leave you or they're going to fancy that person. And so that person wasn't actually a threat. They weren't actually like you're going to die and you need to try and survive like you would react if a bear was chasing you. That's the reason we have this kind of adrenaline release, and you have like the physical effects of emotions, like when you have fear, it's like your eyes go sharper, you become more aware, and time, like kind of everything moves a bit in slow motion because you're hyper aware, and that's so you can fight well in a fight or flight situation. Why would we react like that when a threat, a perceived threat walks in, which is just an attractive person? There's no need for our bodies to react like that. And when it does react like that, a load of chemicals are released. It's taxing, it's stressful to the body. It causes an absolute chemical cascade of stress, terror, stuff that just, it's like toxins to the body. And so we're not meant to be having those reactions. Yet we do, because that person that came in, we perceive them as a potential threat to our survival because we want to stay in a relationship because we're emotionally addicted and attached to the partner. So this is why our emotions, they can cause more damage than we're meant to, because they were never a threat. You never had to react that way. It might end up being that nothing ever happens. And even if they did, your partner did leave with that person, so what? Like you have to love yourself. And so you have to get rid of your emotional attachments to people, places and things, because otherwise you suffer. So the book, The Way of Emotion, I don't want to get too much into this. There's so much to explain about this being in your emotions and how it's the ego, and I'll probably do another episode just completely on it. Either way, your emotions are your ego, and it's your animalistic self. It's your survival, fight or flight type state that causes suffering. It causes suffering. It causes stress, and it's the state that isn't of the higher mind. So another thing to note is the moon represents the ego. And the moon is also representation of the ocean and the water. So when you are living in the sea, you can't see past your emotion. So they can't see past their emotion, okay? And this is the same when you're living in emotion. You can't see past the fear, the jealousy, the anxiety. It makes you not even think clearly when you're acting in those situations because the emotion takes over. And that's the same as being in the sea. You can't see clearly. You can't see past the emotion. And so them living in the sea, being half animal, half human, they haven't ascended into being fully in their highest state as a human or as like the angel yet. They're still half and half. They're still kind of got the animalistic self. They've still got the ego and they're living in the emotion. And so she's living in the ocean, but she wants to rise up. She wants to ascend and taste and experience living in the higher mind and living in the heavenly planes and ascending out of the emotion, ascending out of the ego. And the grandma says when she's 15, she'll be allowed the chance to rise up. Now, I believe, since learning about true enlightenment, what I found is that I'll have to do another episode on this as well, but you have chi, which is life force energy. And what happens is when you are going through these trials and these tests, you can basically live what I call the life of light, and you can fill yourself with enough light that the light lifts you and ascends you up into the higher planes and up into your heavenly state. And what happens internally is all your chakras are filled with light, and your kundalini is like an energetic serpent that kind of lives within you at the bottom of your spine. And when you're filled with enough light, there's certain kind of celestial alignments or certain plant medicines you can take or certain spells you can do that ascend your kundalini up to the top, and you get to experience feeling enlightened. And if you were filled with enough light and you were clean and you were vegan, then you'll actually stay enlightened. And what it does is you stay up there and you never descend into the ego again unless you lose your light. But every day then you live in your higher mind. That is enlightenment. That is, you've attained it and you're out of the animalistic self and you're out of the ego. So what I've learned is that it's possible that you need to hit puberty for your Kundalini to awaken. So I believe that's why they've said when she's 15, and it's like this number 15, once they're 15, they can rise up and get a taste and experience of the higher realm, the higher mind, because I believe what it's saying is that like once you hit that puberty, once you kind of like your sexual energy starts firing up, that's when your Kundalini will awaken, and that's when you get the opportunity to attain enlightenment and ascend and experience the higher planes. And so once she's 15, she's allowed to go up and ascend and experience the higher mind, the heaven on earth, and living up in the higher realms for herself. Next year, one of her sisters would be 15, but the others, well, since each one was a whole year older than the next, the youngest still had 5 long years to wait until she could rise up from the water and see what our world was like. But each sister promised to tell the others about all that she saw and what she found most marvellous on her first day. Their grandmother had not told them half enough, and there were so many things that they longed to know about. The most eager of them all was the youngest, the very one who was so quiet and wistful. Many a night she stood by her open window and looked up through the dark blue water where the fish waved their fins and tails. She could just see the moon and stars. To be sure, their light was quite dim, but looked at through the water they seemed so much bigger than they appear to us. Whenever a cloud-like shadow swept across them, she knew that it was either a whale swimming overhead or a ship with many human beings aboard it. Little did they dream that a pretty young mermaid was down below, stretching her white arms up towards the keel of their ship. The eldest princess had her 15th birthday, so now she received permission to rise up out of the water. When she got back, she had 100 things to tell her sisters about, but the most marvellous thing of all, she said, was to lie on a sandbar in the moonlight when the sea was calm and to gaze at the large city on the shore where the lights twinkled like hundreds of stars. To listen to music, to hear the chatter and clamour of carriages and people, to see so many church towers and spires, and to hear the ringing bells, because she could not enter the city. That was just what she most dearly longed to do. Now, what came to me here as well, when it says she couldn't enter the city, it reminded me of, I think in the Bible they talk about like entering the kingdom of God, and like the city of, say, Jerusalem, or entering the city walls or whatever it is. And the city, the kingdom of God, that is your higher self, that is heaven on earth, that is achieving Christ consciousness. And so because she was still in her emotion, she was still half animal, or in the ego, in her animalistic self, she couldn't enter the city. Oh, how intently the youngest sister listened. After this, whenever she stood up at her window at night and looked up through the dark blue waters, she thought of the great city with all of its clatter and clamour, and even fancied that in the depths she could hear the church bells ring. The next year, her second sister had permission to rise up to the surface and swim wherever she pleased. She came up just at sunset, and she said that this spectacle was the most marvellous sight she had ever seen. The heavens had a golden glow, and as for the clouds, she could not find words to describe their beauty. Splashed with red and tinted with violet, they sailed over her head, but much faster than the sailing clouds were wild swans in a flock. Like a long white veil trailing above the sea, they flew towards the setting sun. She too swam towards it, but down it went, and all the rose-coloured glow faded from the sea and the sky. The following year, her third sister ascended, and as she was the boldest of them all, she swam up a broad river that flowed into the ocean. She saw gloriously green, vine-coloured halls. Places and manor houses could be glimpsed through the splendid woods. She heard all the birds sing, and the sun shone so brightly that often she had to dive under the water to cool her burning face. In a small cove she found a whole school of mortal children paddling about in the water quite naked. She wanted to play with them, but they took fright and ran away. Then along came a little black animal. It was a dog, but she had never seen a dog before. It barked at her so ferociously that she took flight herself and fled into the open sea. But never could she forget the splendid woods and green hills and the nice children who could swim in the water although they didn't wear fish tails. The fourth sister was not so venturesome. She stayed far out among the rough waves, which she said was a marvellous place. You could see all around you for miles and miles, and the heavens up above you were like a vast dome of glass. She had seen ships, but they were so far away that they looked like seagulls. Playful dolphins had turned somersaults and monstrous whales had spouted water through their nostrils so that it looked as if hundreds of fountains were playing all around them. Now the fifth sister had her turn. Her birthday came in winter time, so she saw things that none of the others had seen. The sea was a deep green colour, and enormous icebergs drifted about. Each one glistened like a pearl, she said, but they were more lofty than any church steeple built by man. They assumed the most fantastic shapes and sparkled like diamonds. She had seated herself on the largest one, and all the ships that came sailing by sped away as soon as the frightened sailors saw her there with her long hair blowing in the wind. In the late evening, clouds filled the sky, thunder cracked and lightning darted across the heavens. Black waves lifted those great bergs of ice on high, where they flashed when the lightning struck. On all the ships the sails were reefed, and there was fear and trembling, but quietly she sat there, upon her drifting iceberg, and watched the blue forked lightning strike the sea. Each of the sisters took delight in the lovely new sights when she first rose up to the surface of the sea, but when they became grown-up girls who were allowed to go wherever they liked, they became indifferent to it. They would become homesick, and in a month they said that there was no place like the bottom of the sea where they felt so completely at home. On many an evening the older sisters would rise to the surface arm in arm, all 5 in a row. They had beautiful voices, more charming than those of any mortal beings. When a storm was brewing and they anticipated a shipwreck, they would swim before the ship and sing most seductively of how beautiful it was at the bottom of the ocean, trying to overcome the prejudice that the sailors had against coming down to them. But people could not understand their song, and mistook it for the voice of the storm, nor was it for them to see the glories of the deep. When their ship went down they were doomed, and it was as dead men that they reached the Sea King's palace. On the evenings when the mermaids rose through the water like this, arm in arm, their youngest sister stayed behind all alone, looking after them and wanting to weep, but a mermaid has no tears, and therefore she suffers so much more. "Oh, how I do wish I were 15, she said. "I know I shall love the world up there and all the people who live in it." And at last she too became 15. "Now I'll have you off my hands," said her grandmother, the old Queen Dowager. "Come, let me adorn you like your sisters." In the little maid's hair she put a wreath of white lilies, each petal of which was formed from half of a pearl, and the old queen let 8 big oysters fasten themselves to the princess's tail as a sign of her high rank. "But that hurts," said the little mermaid. "You must put up with a good deal to keep up appearances," her grandmother told her. It's interesting, the white lilies that they put on as the wreath. White often represents like purity, cleanliness, innocence, light, enlightenment. Oh, how gladly she would have shaken off all those decorations and laid aside the cumbersome wreath. The red flowers in her garden were much more becoming to her, but she didn't dare to make any changes. "Goodbye," she says, as she went up through the water, as light and as sparkling as a bubble. The sun had just gone down when her head rose above the surface, but the clouds still shone like golden roses, and in the delicately tinted sky sparkled the clear gleam of the evening star. The air was mild and fresh and the sea unruffled. A great three-master lay in view with only one of all its sails set, for there was not even the whimper of a breeze, and the sailors idled about in the rigging and on the yards. There was music and singing on the ship, and as night came on they lighted hundreds of such brightly coloured lanterns that one might have thought the flags of all nations were swinging in the air. The little mermaid swam right up to the window of the main cabin, and each time she rose with the swell she could peep in through the clear glass panes at the crowd of brilliantly dressed people within. The handsomest of all of them was a young prince with big dark eyes. He could not be more than 16 years old, and it was his birthday, and that was the reason for all the celebration. Up on deck the sailors were dancing, and when the prince appeared among them, 100 or more rockets flew through the air, making it bright as day. These startled the little mermaid so badly that she ducked under the water, but she soon peeped up again, and then it seemed as if all the stars in the sky were falling around her. Never had she seen such fireworks. Great suns spun around, splendid firefish floated through the bright air, and all these things were mirrored in the crystal clear sea. It was so brilliantly bright that you could see every little rope of the ship, and the people could be seen distinctly. Oh, how handsome the young prince was! He laughed and he smiled and shook people by the hand, while the music rang out in the perfect evening. It got very late, but the little mermaid could not take her eyes off the ship and the handsome prince. The brightly coloured lanterns were put out, no more rockets flew through the air, and no more cannon boomed, but there was a mutter and rumble deep down in the sea, and the swell kept bouncing her up so high that she could look into the cabin. Now the ship began to sail. Canvas after canvas was spread in the wind. The waves rose high, great clouds gathered, and lightning flashed in the distance. They were in for a terrible storm, and the mariners made haste to reef the sails. The tall ship pitched and rolled as it sped through the angry sea. The waves rose up like towering black mountains, as if they would break over the masthead. But the swan-like ship plunged into the valleys between such waves, and emerged to ride their lofty heights. To the little mermaid this seemed such good sport, but to the sailors it was nothing of the sort. The ship creaked and laboured. Thick timbers gave way under the heavy blows, waves broke over the ship, the mainmast snapped in two like a reed, the ship listed over on its side, and water burst into the hold. Now the little mermaid saw that people were in peril, and that she herself must take care to avoid the beams and wreckage tossed about by the sea. One moment it would be black as pitch and she couldn't see a thing. Next moment the lightning would flash so brightly that she couldn't distinguish every soul on board. Everyone was looking out for himself as best he could. She watched closely for the young prince, and when the ship split in two, she saw him sink down to the bottom of the sea. At first she was overjoyed that he would be with her, and then she recalled that human people cannot live underwater, and that he could only visit her father's palace as a dead man. No, he should not die. So she swam in among all the floating planks and beams, completely forgetting that they might crush her. She dived through the waves and rode their crests, until at length she reached the young prince, who was no longer able to swim in that raging sea. His arms and legs were exhausted, his beautiful eyes were closing, and he would have died if the little mermaid had not come to help him. She held his head above water and let the waves take them wherever the waves went. At daybreak, when the storm was over, not a trace of the ship was in view. The sun rose out of the waters, red and bright, and its beams seemed to bring the glow of life back to the cheeks of the prince, but his eyes remained closed. The mermaid kissed his high, shapely forehead. As she stroked his wet hair in place, it seemed to her that he looked like that marble statue in her little garden. She kissed him again and hoped that he would live. So the prince looked like the marble statue in a garden, and that marble statue represented the sun. So in the story of Enlightenment, the hero's journey, all of our souls have both a masculine and a feminine aspect to them. But what happens is when we live in the ego and when we live in sin, our souls are polarized, and what it means is that we live mostly in one energy more than the other, and we're not whole and complete and living in both in balance, similar to the whole 12 signs of the zodiac, living in them all kind of thing. So when we are divided against ourselves, in the Bible it talks about when the kingdom of God is divided against itself, the kingdom will fall. It's talking about when our souls are separated and we're divided, and rather than being holy and whole and both masculine and feminine together, married, which is what true marriage is. It's about basically balancing and unifying the masculine and feminine aspects of your soul. Well, when you are unenlightened, you're living in the ego, you're in your animalistic self, and you're polarized, you're just more in one than the other. And so she is the feminine, and she's looking externally for her soul, for the sun, for the masculine energy. So she's seeing the prince as this masculine solar energy and maybe a reflection of her soul, because the masculine can represent sometimes the soul, the feminine can sometimes represent the emotions or the ego. So again, it's like the dance between the sun and the moon. The sun is the soul, the moon is the emotions, and they are the divine feminine and the divine masculine. They come together as one and they create the holy whole, the whole being, the holy being. And so it's possible she's seeing him as the light and as her soul, and it's like she wants to, or she's like attracted to him because he represents the soul. So on a spiritual level, what's interesting is in this story so far, and I'm pretty sure throughout the whole story, there's no characters under the sea that are married. No one has a partner. They're all just single, either male single or female single. So marriage spiritually represents being enlightened, because it's about, like I was saying, the marriage within. It's the masculine and feminine aspects of your soul, of your energy and of your psyche internally unifying together as one, and that's what true marriage is. And so in these stories, in these myths, whenever a couple gets married, whenever there's a union or a unification of a male and a female, that often represents the spiritual aspect of you balancing yourself, balancing the two energies and finding enlightenment. So what can often happen in life is you do that as internal work, but often we look outside of ourselves to feel fulfilled and to feel whole. So I'm a female. Let's say that I have mostly been in my masculine energy internally, though. That means that whoever I'm looking for the feminine energy that I'm lacking, because internally I'm in my masculine energy. My masculine energy is strong, and that's where I'm living mostly. And so what happens is, what I should do is find the feminine energy within me, heal it, learn to be more in that energy, balance it and grow it so that it becomes balanced and equal to the masculine energy, and you can basically grow them together and they become balanced and whole. However, often because we don't know this truth and we kind of don't understand how to properly heal ourselves anymore, we end up looking externally for people or places or things or jobs that are gonna make us feel whole. So say if I am in my masculine energy, I should find the feminine within, so balance the two, and then I've got both my feminine and my masculine strong within me and balanced. Instead, people look externally and they look for things that they think is going to make them feel whole, when actually you're meant to be doing the internal work and the internal marriage. So I'm going to stop it there today, and there's so much more to go through, so we're going to do that in the second recording. So thanks so much for enjoying this with me, and feel free to let me know any thoughts you have, and I'll see you in the next one. I've been Gaby Zacara. Ta-ra!